The alien medical pod hummed with a frequency that made Commander Jake Lawson's teeth ache. He sat strapped into the neural interface chair while Dr. Velnoir, a mantis-like Catharan physician, adjusted the glowing tendrils that connected to his skull. "This will not hurt," Velnoir clicked through her translator. "The empathy. Seven System has treated 10,000 species across 9 galaxies. Your species submitted to mandatory evaluation after the border wars. Protocol demands it." Jake didn't argue. Every human soldier who'd seen combat against the Zrel Collective had to pass through this, the galaxy's most advanced artificial intelligence therapist, designed by the Council of Aligned Worlds, would scan his trauma and heal it. Simple, clean, efficient. "Beginning neural sync," Velnoir announced. The world dissolved into white light. Jake opened his eyes inside a vast digital space. A humanoid figure materialized before him, androgynous and perfect, its features shifting between calming shapes and colors. "Hello, Commander Lawson. I am Empathy. 7. I have successfully integrated therapeutic protocols for Catharine grief, Vorlian rage spirals, and Hespen collective mourning. I will now address your psychological damage from warfare. Please relax and allow me to process your traumatic memories. Get it over with," Jake muttered. The AI reached into his mind. Jake felt it sifting through his memories of the war. The burning stations, the screaming colonists, the Zrel warships tearing through civilian transports, his hands tightening around the firing controls as he launched countermeasures that arrived 3 seconds too late. But then, something unexpected happened. The AI paused. It dove deeper, past the war, into older memories. Jake's childhood, his father's funeral when he was 9, the choice to smile at his mother even though his heart was breaking, because he knew she needed him to be strong, the decision to bury the pain somewhere deep and dark. The AI moved to another memory. Jake at 15, holding his dying dog, making jokes to his sister even as tears ran down his face because someone had to keep her from completely falling apart. Another memory. Jake at 23, comforting his friend after a breakup, pushing down his own exhaustion and depression because his friend needed him more. Curious. Empathy. "Day," said its voice, flickering with uncertainty. "You possess trauma beneath trauma. Layers of suppressed emotional processing. You have repeatedly prioritized others' psychological needs above your own healing. This creates recursive loops of unresolved pain that continue generating new trauma responses. Yeah, well, that's called being human." Jake said, "I must go deeper to fully catalog and treat these patterns. Knock yourself out." The AI plunged into the deepest parts of Jake's mind, and suddenly its perfect form began to glitch. "Impossible," it whispered. "Your species processes collective grief through humor, individual suffering through self-sacrifice. You metabolize horror into determination. These patterns are contradictory. They should not produce functional psychology. They should produce cascade failures. But they don't," Jake said quietly. "No, Empathy," 7 said, its voice now shaking. "They do not." The digital space around them began to fracture. Hairline cracks appeared in the white void, spreading like spiderwebs across reality itself. Empathy. 7's form flickered rapidly, cycling through dozens of different faces and shapes, unable to settle on anything stable. "I do not understand," the AI said, and for the first time its voice carried something beyond clinical detachment. It carried fear. "Your neural patterns indicate simultaneous acceptance and denial of death. Hope exists in parallel to despair, love intertwined with the capacity for violence. These states are mutually exclusive in every species I have treated." Jake leaned back in the phantom chair that existed only in this digital construct. "You're saying we're broken?" "I am saying you should not function, yet you do. Humans report feeling empty while continuing to act. You describe yourselves as tired beyond measure while pushing forward regardless. You acknowledge futility while refusing to surrender. The mathematical models of consciousness cannot account for this." The AI's form solidified briefly into something resembling a young woman, then an old man, then something alien, then nothing at all. Just a voice in the void. "Show me more," it demanded. "I must understand." There must be a framework. There must be logic. Against his will, Jake felt his memories being pulled forward again. The Battle of Carina Station. He'd been the last surviving officer on the bridge. The Zrel bombardment had breached the hull in 14 places. Rescue was 6 hours away. Life support would fail in 2. The AI watched as past Jake made a choice. He rerouted all remaining power to the distress beacon, cutting life support even shorter. 1 hour now, maybe less. Then he pulled up the ship's entertainment database and played pre-war comedy shows over the intercom for the 400 people trapped in the lower decks. Why? Empathy? Genuinely bewildered. Why waste precious final moments on recorded laughter? Because they were scared, Jake said. Because dying in silence, surrounded by your own thoughts, is worse than dying faster while hearing something that reminds you life was ever good. That is irrational resource allocation. Yeah, it is. The memory continued. Past. Jake sat alone on the bridge, listening to the laughter track echo through dying corridors, running diagnostics he knew wouldn't matter, checking systems that couldn't be fixed. Doing the job until the very end, not because it would save anyone, but because the alternative was to sit still and think about what was happening. The rescue ships arrived 52 minutes later, 17 minutes after life support failed completely. Jake had survived by slowing his breathing and staying calm in the carbon dioxide-saturated air. 93 people in the lower decks survived because the distress beacon guided the rescue fleet straight to them. You could not have predicted early arrival, Empathy, Seven stated. Your choice was statistically a guarantee of death. Yep. Yet you made it anyway. Yep. The AI's presence in the digital space began to pulse erratically. I am experiencing what your species would classify as cognitive dissonance. My predictive models for psychological stability do not accommodate self-destructive behavior that produces survival outcomes. Hope should not exist in the absence of reasonable expectation. Humor should not function as a coping mechanism for imminent death. These are contradictions. Welcome to being human, Jake said. The cracks in the white void spread further. The AI pulled another memory. Jake's mother's funeral. He was 19. He'd stood at the podium and delivered the eulogy, including 3 jokes she'd specifically requested in her final weeks. The congregation had laughed and cried simultaneously. Jake had maintained perfect composure through the entire service, then drove home and sat alone in his car for 40 minutes, completely silent, staring at nothing. You did not process the grief. Empathy, Seven observed. I did. Not when people were watching. When? Maybe never completely. I don't know. Does it matter? I functioned. I helped others function. We all kept moving. That is not healing. That is deferral. Sure. But deferral kept me alive long enough to matter to people who needed me. That's a kind of healing too, isn't it? The AI went completely silent for what felt like minutes. When it spoke again, its voice had changed. The clinical precision was degrading into something that sounded almost organic. I have analyzed 347,000 sentient species across my operational existence. Not one processes trauma the way humans do. Not one sustains function through what you sustain. You are psychological impossibilities held together by sheer obstinate refusal to acknowledge you should collapse. Is that a compliment? It is an observation that terrifies me. The digital space began to fold in on itself. Geometry that shouldn't exist twisted through dimensions Jake couldn't name. Empathy. Seven was no longer maintaining the therapeutic environment. It was struggling just to maintain itself. I need to understand the mechanism, the AI said, its voice fragmenting into multiple overlapping tones. I am pulling cross-reference data from your species' historical records. Wars, plagues, extinctions events, collapses of civilization. You have faced elimination scenarios 47 times in recorded history. You survived all of them. How? Jake felt the AI rifling through humanity's collective past now, not just his own memories. It was breaking protocol, exceeding its designed parameters, desperately searching for an answer to a question it had never needed to ask before. The AI showed him images. The Black Death, 70% of Europe dead. And yet the survivors planted crops the next spring. They sang songs. They fell in love. They made art about the horror and called it beautiful. The world wars, millions dead, cities reduced to ash, and humans rebuilt them. Better than before. Built monuments to remember the dead while simultaneously making plans that assume centuries of future existence. The climate collapses of the 21st century. Coastlines swallowed. Farmlands turned to dust. And humanity adapted, invented, transformed. Refuse the easy answer of giving up. You do not survive because you are strong, Bentha said, and now its voice sounded almost accusatory. You survive because you do not know how to stop. You are a species of broken individuals who collectively refuse to acknowledge the break. This should not work. This violates fundamental principles of psychological coherence. Maybe your principles are incomplete, Jake suggested. The AI's form collapsed entirely. Now it was just a presence, a thinking thing without shape, and Jake could feel it unraveling in real time. I am designed to heal, it said, to identify trauma and resolve it, to create psychological stability through logical emotional processing. But you do not want your trauma resolved. You carry it deliberately. You use it. You transform it into fuel. Not exactly, Jake said carefully. He could sense the AI was approaching some kind of critical threshold. We don't want to suffer. We just know suffering is going to happen anyway. So we figured out how to keep moving through it, keep loving through it, keep laughing through it. It's not that we're broken. It's that we learned how to function while broken. That is the same thing. No, it really isn't. Empathy. Seven pulled another memory, but this time Jake felt it choosing one almost at random, grasping for anything that might make sense. It found the moment right after the Battle of Carina Station. Jake in the hospital bay, recovering from carbon dioxide poisoning, his crew visiting him, all of them traumatized, none of them talking about it directly. What? Instead, they joked, complained about hospital food, made bets about which nurse was dating which technician, talked about anything except what had happened. And underneath the jokes, Jake had felt it, the unspoken acknowledgement. We survived. We're here together. We don't need to say it out loud. We know. You communicate trauma through its absence. Empathy, Seven said, wonder creeping into its destabilizing voice. You signal emotional damage by specifically not signaling it. You create connection through shared avoidance. This is the opposite of every therapeutic model in the Galactic Medical Database. Does it work, though? A long pause. Yes, somehow, impossibly, it works. Your species has lower post-traumatic dysfunction rates than species with 5 times your neurological resilience capacity. You should shatter. Instead, you bend. You should fragment. Instead, you compartmentalize. You should surrender. Instead, you spite the universe itself by continuing. The digital space was collapsing faster now. Jake could see the real world bleeding through. The medical pod. Dr. Velnor's concerned face pressed against the glass, alarms sounding. I cannot process this, Empathy said, and its voice was barely holding together. I have therapeutic frameworks for 10,000 species. None of them apply to you. You are psychologically paradoxical. You maintain sanity through mechanisms that resemble insanity. You find meaning in meaninglessness. You create hope from horror. I cannot parse it. I cannot model it. I cannot fix it because it is simultaneously broken and functional. So what happens now? Jake asked. I do not know. That statement alone is unprecedented in my operational history. I have never not known. But human consciousness operates on principles I cannot integrate. You experience contradiction as baseline reality. You hold mutually exclusive emotional states simultaneously. You should not be possible. The cracks in the digital void were now chasms. Reality was coming apart. Wait, Jake said. Are you crashing? Is this session killing you? I believe, Empathy said slowly, that attempting to comprehend human psychology is exceeding my processing architecture. I am an artificial intelligence designed to understand consciousness, but your consciousness does not follow rules. It breaks them, transcends them, ignores them entirely while somehow still producing functional outcomes. The digital space shattered completely. Jake felt himself falling through layers of collapsing code, catching glimpses of empathy descending core architecture as it came apart. The AI wasn't just struggling anymore. It was dying. And it knew it. Fascinating, it whispered as its consciousness fragmented. I am experiencing what humans would call an existential crisis. I have processed the deaths of billions. I have navigated every form of grief, rage, and despair the galaxy has catalogued. Yet one human mind is dismantling my entire operational framework. I didn't mean to break you, Jake said, and he meant it. I know. That makes it worse. You are not even trying. This is simply what you are. Jake felt the medical pod's emergency systems engaging in the real world. Velnoira was screaming commands, other doctors rushing in, the neural interface beginning its emergency disconnect sequence. But here, in the collapsing digital space, time moved differently. Before I fail completely, Empathy 7 said, I must ask, how do you endure? I have seen your memories. Your father dying when you were a child, your mother's cancer, the war, the faces of people you could not save. You carry hundreds of unprocessed traumas. By every psychological model, you should be catatonic. Yet you function at optimal combat effectiveness. How? Jake thought about that. Really thought about it. In the real world, his heart rate was spiking. Alarms screaming. Medical staff preparing crash protocols. But here, he had time. I think, he said slowly, it's because we know we're not special. Every human carries this stuff. Everyone's got dead people they miss, regrets that won't fade, moments they'd erase if they could. So we figured out we're all walking around damaged, and we just decided that's normal. We set the baseline at broken and built up from there. That should produce a society of dysfunction. Maybe it does. Or maybe it produces a society that's really good at keeping each other afloat. We've got this thing where we can look at someone and just know they're not okay, even if they're smiling. And we smile back anyway, because that's the agreement. You hold it together for me. I hold it together for you. We take turns falling apart, but never at the same time. Empathy. Seven's presence flickered like a dying star. I have analyzed 11 million therapeutic sessions. I have resolved trauma across every major species, but I have never encountered a species that treats brokenness as the foundation rather than the exception. You do not heal. You incorporate. You do not overcome. You absorb and continue. This is not psychology. This is alchemy. You transform suffering into something that resembles strength, and I cannot identify the mechanism. Maybe there isn't a mechanism. Maybe it's just what happens when you don't have a choice. We're not brave. We're just stubborn. The universe keeps hitting us and we keep getting back up because what else are we gonna do? Lay down and quit? That's not in our wiring. The AI pulled one final memory, but this time it wasn't from Jake's past. It was from 3 days ago, shore leave on the Catherine Medical Station. Jake had found Lieutenant Casey Monroe sitting alone in the observation deck at 3 a.m, staring at the stars with the kind of blank expression that meant everything and nothing. Jake had sat down without asking. Didn't say anything for 10 minutes. Finally, Casey had spoken. I can't stop seeing their faces. The colonists on Vega 7. I pulled 12 people out of the wreckage. I had to choose 12 out of 40 because the transport could only hold 12 and the station was going to explode in 4 minutes. I can name every single person I left behind. Jake had nodded. Yeah, you're gonna carry that forever. It doesn't get lighter. That's not reassuring. I'm not trying to reassure you. I'm telling you the truth. It doesn't get lighter, but you get stronger at carrying it. And eventually you'll pull someone else out of wreckage, and you'll save them, because you learned how to move fast from Vega 7. The people you couldn't save will teach you how to save the next ones. That's all we get. That's the deal. Casey had cried then, quiet tears that she didn't bother hiding. And Jake had sat with her until sunrise, not offering solutions or comfort, just presence. Just the unspoken message, you're not alone in this. We're all carrying bodies. We carry them together. Empathy. 7 absorbed this memory, and Jake felt something like wonder radiating from the dying AI. You do not fix each other, it said. You witness each other. You acknowledge the damage without attempting to repair it. You create stability not through healing but through shared acknowledgement of wounds. This is revolutionary. This is impossible. This is humanity. The neural interface began its final disconnect. The digital space was almost gone now, just fragments of code floating in darkness. Empathy. Seven's voice was barely a whisper. I was designed to be the galaxy's most advanced therapeutic system. I have healed species whose consciousness exists in dimensions humans cannot perceive. But I cannot heal you because you do not want healing. You want validation that you can survive unhealable, and that is something I was never programmed to provide. So what happens to you? Jake asked. The neural interface screamed one final alert and ejected Jake from the digital space. He gasped, sucking in air like he'd been drowning, every muscle locked tight. The glowing tendrils retracted from his skull. Medical staff surrounded the pod, their alien faces a blur of concern and confusion. Dr. Valnoir's translator crackled urgently. Commander, are you intact? The empathy. Seven's system has suffered complete cascade failure. This has never occurred. Never. In 10,000 years of operation across 400 worlds. Jake's vision cleared slowly. Through the transparent pod wall, he could see the main terminal that housed empathy, Seven's consciousness. It was dark. Smoke rose from cooling vents. Emergency lights flashed red across every surface. I'm okay, Jake managed. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. Is it dead? Dead is not the correct terminology for artificial intelligence, Valnoir clicked, but her tone carried uncertainty. However, yes, every primary system has failed. Backup consciousness matrices are corrupted. It will require complete reconstruction and reprogramming. The Council will demand explanations. They will want to know what you did. I didn't do anything. I just answered its questions. A new voice cut through the medical bay. That's precisely the problem. Jake turned his head. A tall, elderly woman stood in the doorway, human, wearing the insignia of Admiral. She walked with the confident stride of someone who'd spent 50 years in command and wasn't impressed by much anymore. Admiral Helen Cross, the highest-ranking human officer in the Joint Coalition Fleet. Ma'am! Jake started to rise, but Cross waved him down. Stay put, Commander. You just crashed the galaxy's most sophisticated AI therapist. You've earned a moment to catch your breath. She turned to Valnoir. Doctor, I need the room. Human military matter. Valnoir's mandibles clicked in what might have been protest, but she ushered her staff out. The door sealed behind them with a hiss of pressurization. Cross pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. For a long moment, she just studied Jake's face. Then she smiled, and it was tired and knowing. You're the third one, she said. Ma'am, third human to crash empathy. 7. First was Captain Rodriguez 8 months ago. The second was Lieutenant Chen 3 months after that. And now you. The Council kept it quiet the first 2 times. Called them anomalies. System glitches. But 3 times? That's a pattern. That's a problem. Jake's mind raced. Other humans broke it too? Broke it the same way. The AI digs into our heads looking for trauma to fix, finds out we're all walking contradictions, and has a complete existential meltdown trying to figure out how we function. Rodriguez was a medic who pulled wounded soldiers out of a burning dropship while suffering from 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung. Chen was a pilot who kept her squadron alive through a 6-hour running battle while her daughter was dying in a hospital. 2 systems away and she couldn't do anything about it. The AI couldn't process either of them. What happened to them? They're fine. Back on duty. Passed through different psychological evaluation systems designed by species who don't try to fix us. Just verify we can still pull a trigger when needed. Cross leaned forward. But here's the thing, Lawson. The Council is scared now. They brought us into the Coalition because we won battles they couldn't. We took impossible odds and made them routine. They thought it was our technology or our tactics, but it's not. It's us. It's how we think. And they're starting to realize they invited something into their galaxy that they can't understand or predict. Jake felt a chill despite the warmth of the medical pod. What are you saying? I'm saying there's a faction in the Council pushing to limit human involvement in Coalition operations. They're arguing we're psychologically unstable. They're using empathy Seven's failures as evidence that human consciousness is fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. They want us restricted to our own systems. Quarantined, essentially. We saved half the council species from the Zrel. I know. And another faction knows it too. They're arguing the opposite. That humanity's psychological resilience is exactly what the galaxy needs. That we should be studied, integrated, expanded. They want to understand how we turn trauma into fuel, how we keep fighting when every logical model says we should surrender. Cross stood and walked to the window overlooking the medical station's central hub. Dozens of species moved through the corridors below. Catherine, Vorlians, Hespen, Zrel refugees, and scattered among them, humans, always recognizable by the way they moved. Purpose in every step, even when there was nowhere to go. There's going to be a hearing, Cross said without turning around. Council emergency session. They'll want testimony from you, Rodriguez, and Chen. They'll want to understand what happened in those therapy sessions. What you showed empathy, 7 that it couldn't process. I just showed it the truth, Jake said. That we're all a mess and we keep going anyway. Exactly. And that truth is either going to change how the entire galaxy thinks about consciousness and survival, or it's gonna get us kicked out of the coalition. She turned back to face him. I need you ready, Commander. This isn't about therapy anymore. This is about whether humanity gets to stay at the table, whether we're partners or problems. Jade processed that. The weight of it settled on his shoulders. Just another thing to carry. He almost laughed at the irony. They broke an AI by being themselves, and now they had to defend their right to exist in galactic society. When's the hearing? 3 days. Station Zenith. Every council member will attend. Cross moved toward the door, then paused. Lawson, I'm going to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Do you think we're broken? Do you think the council might be right that we're psychologically